Welcome back to Your Voice America. I have me today one of my favorite guys, Peter St. Ange. I'm sure that you've seen him. He is all over everywhere. His shows are fantastic. He always has excellent economic and political analysis. And today he's joining us to talk about what else? Doge, right? That's the big deal that's going on. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Bill.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, Trump ran on Doge. This is the thing that amazes me. Democrats are like, I didn't vote for Elon Musk. It's like, well, Trump ran on this for like 6 months that he was going to do this.
Yeah.
He's doing exactly what people wanted him to do, and yet the Democrats are like, where did this come from, right?
Yeah, that's what they're pretending. Before the election, Elon was pretty high profile. He was on stage with Trump all the time. They
Right.
were going on and on about all the stuff they were doing. This is like Elon's relationship with Trump is almost too transparent. Every minute detail. They were sitting on the plane together, eating fast food. They were hanging out all the time. He had the Occupy Mars t-shirt, the whole routine. So this has been absolutely transparent. Now, if you want to contrast this to what presidents usually do, which is that they have these sort of shadowy advisors,
Right.
maybe on national security, maybe Dr. Fauci, maybe Mr. Gates, right? So presidents have long relied on various advisors. And in this case, this has been by far the most transparent relationship that a president has had with a major advisor.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. And they're setting up a website now, aren't they, where they're going to just report everything and it is remarkable. And here's the thing, it's sort of a kill the messenger thing from the Democrats because he's coming out and he's reporting all of this waste and fraud and hundreds of millions spent here, hundreds of millions spent there. I call for $1 billion for left-handed smoke shifters in outer Mongolia. And yet the Democrats aren't upset about that. They're upset the fact that he's allowed to look, right?
Well, that's what's really astounding here. So if you look at polling on Doge, something like 73% of Americans, that was a December CBS poll, 73% of Americans want government spending substantially
Right.
cut.
Right.
Right. Three-quarters of Americans don't agree on anything. That is absolutely overwhelming. What Democrats could do in an alternative reality is they could sit down and say, wow, I'm just as shocked as you guys are that one of the things that was stuffing marbles into cats' rectum. This is weird stuff.
They really did
Democrats
that.
could have sat down. Yes, sir. This was on Jesse Waters just the other day. They're also doing transgender experiments on rodents. This is just weird. This is like science fiction stuff. Nobody in America voted for their tax dollars to be used on this. So Democrats could have sat down and said, you know what? I'm shocked. It's out of control. And, you go back, Obama and Bill Clinton both, they had government efficiency campaigns they ran on. I think Clinton laid off several 100,000 government workers, right? This should not be a partisan issue. And it shouldn't be a partisan issue, partly because 73% of Americans want this stuff cut out. So Democrats are being absolutely suicidal here. Instead of joining in and saying, you know what, we're right, let's join this Doge Commission, let's figure out where the money's being wasted. Instead of doing that, they are dying on this hill. And of course, the reason I think is the same reason why the Democrat Party has lost its way. So the Democrat Party, ever since FDR, has been the party of the little guy, right? The Rust Belt, urban Americans, right? People who need a hand up. That's been their shtick. And if you look at what the Democrat Party has done over the past decade, they've just full on become the party of the elites, right? So your money is going to illegals to manufacture new voters. It's going to Ukraine because who is getting a share. It's not going to North Carolina. It's not going to the inner cities. Right? That was a big reason why Trump got so many votes from Black Americans and from Hispanic Americans, is because the money is being siphoned out of the traditional Democrat constituencies towards, whether it's green energy or Ukraine, towards these sort of pie in the sky projects of the elite. So the Democrats are really sort of crippled at the moment, where they can see the polling that says, 70, 80% of Americans support Doge. There was a focus group the other day, Axios reported this out in Arizona. They had 11 swing voters, and Axios is using them as like a weather vane for what public opinion is. So these people are all swing voters. 11 out of 11 support Elon. And keep in mind, the mainstream media has been full on attacking
Right.
Elon, right? They say he's going to steal your social security number. I guess Elon's going to like rent a car using my number.
Right.
They keep saying Elon talks about fraud without evidence, right? That without evidence phrase they were using during COVID.
They always say that,
So
right?
absolutely. So media's been doing everything they can to gaslight people against Elon, against Doge, and you've got 100% of swing voters who support this. You never see 100% in politics. So it's failing spectacularly.
Right.
If I loved the Democrat Party, I would tell them, get your head out of the sand and join on with this. Talk about how you're upset about it too. You're shocked that this is happening. Of course, they all bought it and they're all on the take. But the point is, if you want to maintain power, you've got to at least pretend to be fighting the corruption instead of fighting Doge.
Exactly. This is one of Trump's great things that he does as a great negotiator. He goes into a situation and he says some outrageous things, does some outrageous things, and he takes the middle. Okay, he takes the middle and he pushes everybody out of their comfort zone. And then everybody will always want to return to entropy, right? They'll want to return to their comfort zone. But to do that, they have to come back to where Trump is because now he's in the middle. And that's what he's done now. He's become a champion of the middle class. And he's like, listen, I'm going to be your voice to fight against these Democrat elites. And then when people that can't pay the rent, can't put food on the table, can't send their kids to the kind of schools they want to send them to, and all of a sudden they hear about millions and millions of dollars being sent overseas to these things, promoting election integrity in India. India does fine with their elections. They don't need our help on that. It really gets under their skin, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, the last person or the last president we really had who had that skill, sort of understanding where the people are, was probably Bill Clinton. Right. Bill Clinton, when you look back at his presidency, it was kind of all over the place. And people complained about it at the time. This is the 90s. They said the problem with Bill Clinton is that he sticks his finger in the air and he sees where the air is. Well, yes, Bill Clinton was very, very good. He had a pair of antennae where he knew where the people were on issues, and he was relatively not ideological. Right. So he had welfare reform. One of the big issues he pushed was a strong border. Right. So the Democrats have lost touch with that. And ironically, I mean, this was something that came out during the campaign. In a sense, the same Democrats won in 2024. Right. Trump spent most of his life as a Democrat. Tulsi Gabbard, RFK. Elon Musk was a Democrat until very recently.
Right.
So essentially what's happened is that the same parts of the Democrat Party have hived off, made common cause with the relatively sane parts of the Republican Party. And then these sort of establishments in both parties are fighting him, right? You've got the warmonger rhinos on one side. You've got the elite tools on the other side. And I mean, ideally, we want the Democrat Party to survive, right? We want it to find its wits again, to learn how to listen to voters instead of special interests so that we can actually have competitive elections where both parties are suggesting something reasonable. As much fun as it is to dance on the rubble of the Democrat Party, I do want two competitive parties. But right now, the Democrats, maybe they didn't lose hard enough. And so they're still in denial that they're out of touch with voters, and that, if you look at, of all the things that Trump did, the one that really got them upset, right, the one that had them out there, chanting and dropping the F-bomb, that was going after U.S. aid.
Right.
Right now, donations to foreign countries, that is like the least popular of federal spending.
Right.
And that's the hill that they chose to defend, not, mass deportation, not tariffs, not these other things that they claimed they cared about. That's the hill that they chose. And the reason is specifically because they've become a tool of the elite. They are completely out of touch with the people. Now, it's understandable because the left-wing media for decades has run interference for them, right? So Democrats can wander off into the special interest swamps and they don't have to worry about it because media will process that for voters and get them on board. That magic is shifting, right? When you're living in a world where the entirety of mainstream media is attacking Doge and it's got 73% support, That is not the old world, right? Now you're in a new reality here where the mainstream media can't cover for the Dems. The Dems actually have to get back in touch with voters. And it looks like they're incapable until they get another couple of shellackings at the polls.
Yeah, it's remarkable. You know, the golden rule, they say the person with the gold makes the rules. And the person with the gold for the Democrats has been these foreign donations coming in. These are globalists, these are Marxists that have been funding the Democrat Party. And this is what has dragged the Democrat Party so far left, because to keep getting that money coming in, that I believe, money being laundered from Ukraine, money coming from other foreign sources, money coming from USAID, and all these, that they have to go further and further left. And that, you know, guys like RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard and Elon Musk didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party left them. They left them behind. They've gone so extreme and so far to the left that it really has given a great opportunity for Trump. One of the things I always used to say in the past was that America is 20% far right, 20% far left, and 60% just wants stuff to work. And right now, what the Democrats have done is they are pandering just to that 20% on the far left and giving that whole 60% for Trump just to make things work. And what is about making things work? Doge is about making things work.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can kind of understand now that we see the scale of corruption, right? Now that Doge is uncovering that, you can kind of understand how they got there, because the dollars involved are absolutely obscene. Amazing. Like to the point where the entire left may be tax funded. Like, you know, the BLM riots, the sort of instant protest. You know, whenever Trump would say something rude last term, he'd suddenly have 500 people out demonstrating, these sort of rent-a-mobs. This is all funded seemingly by government money. And what we've uncovered so far, that might only be a tenth of it. You know, if you take, for example, so Trump, they tried to impeach him twice. And both times he had a couple of Republicans who crossed over and voted to impeach him. And at the time, people were like, what, have you lost your mind? But now, if you look at the career trajectory of those people afterwards, they all got very, very nice, cushy jobs after that at universities and other places. Right. So, and of course, universities receive north of $8 billion in federal aid. And then you put on the research money and the grants and the student loan subsidies. You put it all together, it might be north of $100 billion. And so it's not just the foreign aid, the $40 billion through USA that they've been funneling into the left. There are potentially hundreds of billions of dollars that flow into the left. And, you know, when people complain about how spineless the Republicans are, what's an interesting question, exactly how much of that is paid, right? How much of that is a question of your tax dollars are being used to fund the entire left, and they scrape off a little hunk for the swing vote Republicans so that they can run the country using your tax dollars in really a fundamentally corrupt system.
Right. Well, let's talk about laying off all these people. Now, there used to be rules, or there probably still are rules, against just firing civil servants. You had to go through like 15 years of appeals and all these sort of things. And I believe that Trump signed the Schedule F executive order, didn't he?
He signed the executive order. All of these things are, of course, going to be litigated. You've got precedents on both sides. But fundamentally, when you go back to the Constitution, the operation of the executive branch is completely under the control of the president.
Right. Congress
can pass laws. They can pass all the laws they want to try to protect civil servants. But if the executive is not under control of Congress, then those are performative. They're decoration. They don't matter. So that is all going to be litigated at the Supreme Court. One of the main cases is called Humphrey's Executor, and that's from 1934 or something. So that's probably the first one that's going to go up, and that talks about agency heads. But fundamentally, you know, there are standing rules that you can fire any federal bureaucrat for inefficiency, quote unquote, which that's going to cover.
And that's what the separation letters have said. You're not doing your job. You're not being efficient.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Exactly. Well, we knew the Democrats were going to go lawfare on this. They're going to go judge shopping on this. And go ahead, please.
Oh, I was going to say there was an interesting data point. There was a migrant shelter out in San Diego. And, you know, the migrants aren't showing up at the border anymore. And so they announced that they were shutting down their migrant services, and they were going to take all that budget and they're going to put it on lawyers now. So these lawyers are going to try to contest deportations, are
Right.
going to try to create precedents that'll then go nationwide. So you're seeing a wholesale shift of the left where they recognize the existential threat from Doge that it will cut off all of that money. And so what money they do have, what they've already salted away and stolen from taxpayers, they're putting that onto lawfare. So at this point, the key question is going to be the makeup of the Supreme Court. And, we do have 6 Republican appointees. Depending on the issue, 5 of them are generally considered pretty solid. 3 of them Trump himself appointed. So a lot of these are going to make it to the Supreme Court. The thing is that Trump is moving so fast that the legal system normally has several different layers of appeals, and each of those layers can take quite a while because one side or the other can try to stretch it out. So a lot of these are not going to be addressed for a while.
Right.
Now, of course, the Supreme Court can reach down and grab a case and they could decide it quickly, which I hope they would do. And then there, I think, really the question is, how is the Supreme Court feeling about all this? And one of the more interesting data points there, I think, has been how aggressive the left has been during the Biden administration, not only talking about packing courts, which would effectively neutralize the Supreme Court altogether. It would just become a sort of pet of Congress, but in actually threatening justices, right? So there was a would-be assassin who approached one justice. So if the Supreme Court feels that the integrity of the court is sufficiently under threat, then they might reach down and address these things earlier rather than later.
Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, these federal judges are, they're district judges, and they're not national judges. They're district judges, and they are, the way our system works is they can make a ruling that affects a national rule, affects it nationally, even though they're only district judges. And they really are like kings, and queens on this sort of thing. They just unilaterally make this choice, and they're unelected. And this is supposed to be our weights and balances and all that in our government. But the problem is that with the judicial, the legislature is balanced with the executive, and the judicial is supposed to balance all those. But you have the executive in here that supposedly is answering to the judicial. Judicial's calling the tune. But who does the judicial answer to? Only itself. Right. Only the Supreme Court. This is the problem that people are having. And also, one of the other things is, people say, well, what if Trump just ignores these orders? Well, they can find him in contempt. I'm like, well, so what? Only the executive branch can enforce a contempt order, and that's the DOJ. That, the balances is that the Justice Department doesn't the judicial branch doesn't have enforcement authority, do they?
Right. Well, we saw that under Biden with the student loan bailouts, where he was bragging about defying the Supreme Court, and Merrick Garland didn't go after him. Now, interestingly, if you look at the original intent of the Constitution, so Marbury v. Madison was the case that introduced judicial review of federal actions, and that was, I think it was about 15 years after the Constitution came out. And so what was the original system, just for argument's sake here, the original system, you had no judicial review by federal courts. What you had was judicial review by state courts, right? Because the original way the Constitution is set up, the states are supreme. Mm-hmm. So state judges would make decisions. They would review whether they thought a federal action was constitutional or not. And then they would make a decision that only applied in that state. And by the way, that could include nullifying the federal actions, which of course came to a head going into the Civil War. But that's the original system. So not only are federal judges sort of deciding nationwide policy, that's against the original intent of the Constitution. In fact, the original intent of the Constitution is that the Supreme Court doesn't even review these things. State courts do, and only within their state.
Right. Yeah, it's remarkable. But this was my logic when I was thinking about this before online. If the founders had intended the judicial branch to be able to act like kings, like demagogues, and be able to control the legislature, be able to control the executive, they would have given them enforcement authority. But the fact they didn't tells me that the founders intended. They say, "Oh, it's a constitutional crisis if Trump, defies the judicial." It's like, well, to me, in my mind, the reason why the founders did not give the judicial enforcement authority is because they wanted the president to be able to defy them if he felt that he needed to. And the enforcement lies within the executive branch. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I were running the show, I would just defy them until it hits the Supreme Court. And then once the Supreme
Right.
Court decides on it, then at that point obey, which would be a darn sight better than Biden did. Because remember, Biden disobeyed all the way past the Supreme Court. The
Right.
Supreme Court touched on it and he bragged about defying them. So yeah, no, I would say just keep doing what you're doing. And if and when it hits the Supreme Court, because a lot of these things, they intentionally engage in lawfare knowing that it's going to take a long time to hit the Supreme Court.
Right.
So they can try to run out the clock as long as possible.
Right. That's what and Trump has come out and said, listen, I'm going to go along with the courts. I'm not going to fight him and so on and so forth. Well, we'll see. We'll see if push comes to shove, if he continues along with that. Okay, let me ask you this. What do you think about the whole idea of impeaching judges? Now, the problem with impeaching judges is just like a president. You need 2/3 to kick them out. Yeah. But no judge wants to be an impeached judge. You can impeach them in the House with a simple majority. You can't kick them out. So is that an intimidating factor for these judges that they don't want to, I'm an impeached judge on my resume?
Unfortunately, I don't think it is anymore. There was a time when being impeached was probably a dark stain on your reputation, but nowadays they'd be held up as a hero, right? Yeah. Because they are, resisting the Trump oligarchy. So I am not sure it's got the power it used to have. I mean, really, the only solution there, because you have to get to 2/3 in the Senate in order to convict on an impeachment, you would need around about 15 Democrats. In today's environment, that's going to be impossible. I think the only hope you possibly have of getting there is if the Democrat Party essentially splits into a progressive branch and a centrist. They used to be called the New Democrat Coalition, basically a Bill Clinton style centrist branch. And then at that point, the Republicans would make common cause with the New Democrat. We're so many steps away from that I think near term, the impeachment is, I don't think there's any hope of it succeeding.
Yeah, I just think it's something that's a scare factor. It's not going. Well, you're not going to be able to kick anybody out. But like I said, right. I don't think a judge wants to be known as an impeached judge because there's impeachment and there's conviction. And just being impeached, he can be impeached in the House. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, no. I think honestly, once they get impeached, they graduate to the $50,000 speaking fees category, and they go and give the commencement at Harvard, and that whole left-wing tax-funded activist industrial complex kicks into gear, and the money starts raining down on them. So to be honest, I think they would love nothing more. If you look at the various people who were sort of lionized by the left for opposing Trump, it'd be the best thing to happen to their careers, certainly to their finances.
Well, we'll see how it goes. I know Trump is trying to play ball with them, but we'll see how it goes. Now, we just found out from Elon that 25 million people over the age of 100 are on Social Security. And now we're finding out that we've been sending Social Security checks to imaginary people overseas, right? I mean, it's just completely out of control.
Yeah. So the fascinating thing here, there is a standard within government that 90% of payments should be clean. So only 10% that are, either an error or malfeasance or whatnot. Now put that into perspective. So Zelle, the app where you can send money to people, Zelle has a error or fraud rate of 0.1%. Right? The federal government is 10%. It's 100 times higher. And keep in mind, that's the goal. That is not the reality. That is the goal, is 10%, of which almost all agencies fail. Recently they had news out that the Pentagon had failed its, I think, 26th consecutive audit in a row. They've lost track of trillions of dollars. It is completely unremarkable. Like you would expect that a massive amount of fraud is going on in this. The GAO, the Government Accounting Office, which is supposed to be sort of the government green shades, they have long estimated that fraud and error in government payments is something like 300 to 500 billion a year. Now that's funny, right? Because remember, the left-wing media, New York Times, is going on about, Elon alleges fraud and waste without evidence. Okay, well, the government has long estimated 300 or 500 billion. So I think without a doubt, once we start digging into Social Security, it's one big chunk of change, Medicare, Medicaid, the fraud rates are just going to go up and up. You're going to have people who are not Americans who are receiving all kinds of benefits. You're going to have people overseas who are receiving benefits. You're going to have people who are allegedly 150 years old who somebody else is collecting their benefits. So I think that in terms of the actual dollars involved, right, because programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, because they're so large, right, collectively there's something like over $4 trillion in spending. I think we are going to find an absolute massive amount of fraud in there, possibly 400 or 500 billion worth.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. And the Democrats are in a position where they have to defend this. It's not a good
It's,
spot.
yeah, no, it's insane. Like, if I were rooting for them, I'd shake them and be like, what the heck are you guys doing? I mean, payment to fake people, from Social Security, this should not be a partisan issue. There should be a vote
Right.
winner.
They're defending the indefensible. Okay. Let's wrap it up on this. One of the things that happened is that we found out that Joe Biden ended up with an annualized 5.7% inflation rate.
Yeah.
And that's, folks,
Yeah.
that's new inflation, every year on top of the old inflation. And the problem is that Joe Biden said, well, we brought inflation down. Yeah, but you already had, it's like, well, we fixed the broken pipe. Yeah, but the basement's already flooded. Okay. So yeah, and then we find out that so many of these jobs that they brought in were just imaginary jobs that are going away. They were gig work, mostly for foreign folks, not for Americans. I mean, really has been exposed as an entirely fake economy, hasn't it?
Yeah, so that's kind of the problem here, right? The media had been carrying water for Cackles, trying to get her over the finish line, but this has been a stagflationary economy. That's a
Yep.
big reason why she lost the election in November, right? So inflation it's actually been going up over the past year. And, his sort of Joe Biden's final inflation number here is 5.7% annualized, pretty rough.
That's a
Inflation
lot.
was supposed to be dead and
It was
gone
1.5 under
over
Trump
a
during
year
his
ago.
first term. 1.5 under
Yeah, I
Trump.
think
Yeah.
he ended up at like 1.9. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is really the jobs numbers. So we've had these massive revisions where they basically just evaporate imaginary jobs
Right.
that the Biden administration had been reporting. And so the latest one was 589,000 jobs that were revised away. We're also looking at 70% of new jobs are either in government or in education and welfare, which are what the Wall Street Journal calls them, the welfare industrial complex. So only 1 in 3 jobs is actually in the private sector, which pays for all of this. 99.2% of new jobs went to foreign-born workers, not native-born. Native-born
99
are
point,
80% of the
unbelievable.
country.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's shocking. And so the problem here is that Joe Biden really had us on the path to a stagflationary recession. And the question is, can Trump turn it around? And so the key tools that he has are cutting taxes, cutting regulations, those both get the economy growing faster, and cutting spending, which brings inflation down. And of course, the problem is that the Dems are unified in fighting against him. They would rather watch it all burn. And there are enough rhinos on his side who, in the abstract, they love cutting spending, but they have friends who write checks to them. And
Right.
so the question is, can Trump cut through Congress's opposition in time to pull us out of what's essentially the Biden recession?
Well, I tell you what, it's going to be exciting to watch. This has been Peter St. Ange. Watch all his stuff's always amazing. He's one of the few podcasters, I watch where I say, man, I wish I could have said that. So he always has great stuff. Pete, we only have about 2 minutes here left. How can people reach out to you and follow you?
I post daily videos over on X. So that's Prof. St. Onge, PROFSTONGE. So I have a newsletter at profstantonge.com and a podcast that comes out every week. So check it out.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Folks, we'll see you again soon. Thanks, Pete.
All right. Thanks, Bill.
Welcome to this very special edition of Your Voice America. I have with me today Justine Brooke Murray. She is the host of MRC TV and very active on X. Big Trump supporter, has lots of great ideas. And I asked her to come on the show to talk about what's going on in Europe with their loss of freedom of speech. Welcome to the show, Justine.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great. It's great to have you on. Okay. JD Vance went to Europe The guy is Daniel in the lion's den. I mean, he's just fearless. He goes in there and he says, listen, guys, we share common ground, but what's the deal with limiting free speech over here? I mean, you have people being thrown into jail for Facebook posts. You have a guy that's praying silently 100 yards from an abortion clinic, and he's thrown into jail for thinking wrong. What's going on over there?
I like to call Europe ignorance is your strength, Stan, because you really can't tell the difference anymore between the UK, between Europe, and between these oppressive countries in the Middle East. It seems like they've actually become these oppressive countries. And it's so funny that they always say, just like the left here in America always says, in the name of democracy, we must completely destroy everything that makes a free nation free. And JD Vance was right on the money. Unfortunately, when he said, hey, we have common values with Europe, with you guys, like, what are we doing here? I don't think that's the case anymore. I don't think Europe and America share those common values. The UK seems to be reverting back to the days of King George, actually.
Yeah, well, Europe has got fascist tendencies. They always have. There's a reason why both world wars started in Europe. These people, they've got fascist tendencies. And I think they tend to be like that maybe because, their entire countries are like states here in America. They're bordered by everybody. I think they feel very defensive all the time. And, they have allowed this migrant wave to come in. These people from all these third world countries, a heavily Muslim population. And now in London, I mean, you go into a city in London and you would not think that you're in London. You would think you were in the Middle East somewhere. And they actually have cities and areas where you can't even go into because it's not safe. And they have these anti-hate speech laws, but really they're not hate speech. What there are is you're not allowed to criticize these migrants. What do you think?
You're not allowed to criticize anything that the leftists who control Europe disagrees with. And as you said, it's criticizing these so-called innocent refugees, the same refugees who gang rape little girls. And if you dare try to investigate that or ask questions, I believe Parliament in the UK actually shot down a resolution saying, hey, let's investigate the negligence that we've noticed over the past decades of leftists, particularly leftists in power, saying, oh, we don't need to investigate those gang rapes because that would hurt, quote unquote, community relations with our happy, friendly newcomers. You're not allowed to ask. If you dare ask those questions, you're automatically deemed a bigot. And that's the problem when you have a phrase called hate speech. There's no such thing as hate speech because you might think something's hate speech and I might think something else is hate speech. But their goal is to basically silence all criticism. That is the definition of authoritarianism. And it's quite funny how you have the mainstream media saying, oh, actually, JD Vance, it's free speech that caused Nazi Germany to gain their power.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, here's the thing. And this is what Germany has been saying. In response to J.D. Vance's speech, they said, "Well, hey, we're offended by this because we have free speech, in Germany. You can't, and our free speech means that you can't be, denying free speech to minorities and so on and so forth. What they're not saying is, but we are denying free speech to the majority, to most of our citizens here. Can't say anything negative about these things. I mean, there was one woman." Who posted a meme, a truthful meme about a spike in crime amongst migrants. And you've had these countries, I mean, just overrun with crime from these migrants because, a lot of these migrants are coming from countries where the culture is medieval, basically. And, they are marrying, 12-year-olds there, and child rape and that sort of thing is a normal thing. And then they bring this to these other countries. And these things happen, and the leadership says, oh, well, they don't understand the culture. It's okay. But if you post online a meme or say something critical about these monsters, from this country are committing, then you get knocked on the door with the police. Then you go to jail because you dare criticize them. It's so upside down, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing about censorship. When they're saying that you expressing your own free speech, it censors minorities for some reason. That makes no sense. Because when what J.D. Vance is saying, what the right is saying, is that everybody should be allowed to speak freely. No matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're a minority ethnically or you have the minority opinion, but you're automatically platforming hate as the main ideology if you censor another opinion. In fact, that's actually what they've done. That's what Europe is doing. They're actually platforming only the mainstreaming of the hatred by these innocent refugees who also hate Jews. In fact, because of their speech codes, they've actually only allowed the hatred towards Jews, the hatred towards other groups expressed by these primitive cultures. They've only allowed those opinions to be mainstream. Anyone criticizing them, they're the ones who are censored. So actually, they're the ones reverting back to Nazi Germany through their own censorship. Right. It's basically Nazi Germany, but all the Nazis are recast as DEI characters.
Right, exactly. Well, you can take the people out of the third world, but you can't take the third world out of the people. They're going to bring their culture. They're going to bring their culture to you. And this is the problem with socialism in general. Like Kamala Harris said, I want equal outcomes. I want equity. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you can't raise everybody up to the level of excellence, because not everybody is excellent. You have different levels of talent, different levels of ambition, different levels of work. But then you say, well, we have to have equal outcomes. What do you have to do? You have to reduce everyone to the lowest common denominator. Well, of course, this goes against human nature because, if you make it unprofitable for the makers to make stuff, they won't make stuff anymore. And you end up with bread lines and all these other things, which is what these socialist countries always end in. And so this is what's happening in Europe is because you can't raise these people from these third world countries up to a mindset and a lifestyle that is equal with Western values, you have to bring Western values down to their level. And it breaks everything. And Trump is saying, this is not going to happen anymore. Okay? I'm drawing the line in the sand. And I'm not putting up with you guys doing this. And the beauty that Trump has is he knows he holds all the cards because whether it be Mexico or Canada or Europe, they can't survive without our protection and without our economic ability to trade with them. They can't survive. So Donald Trump knows at the end of the day, these guys might rattle a saber, but at the end of the day, he's got them. What do you think?
I have to agree with you on that. You hear the squawking from the mainstream media, from the squawking women on The View, from everyone who's whining, oh, President Trump is anti-democratic now because he's putting our feds in check. Now the feds don't automatically have a comfy salary funded by taxpayers, funded by us. And it's just so funny, the hypocrisy coming from the mainstream media, who they did President Biden's bidding for his entire administration, and suddenly they're all worried because they no longer are propped up by the administration. The administration is no longer on their side, and for once, maybe they have to report objectively, but they don't, and they don't really know what to do. They're scrambling. They lost the election. The MSNBC, I like to call the MSDNC.
Yeah.
So all they have to do now is whine and kvetch. That's all they have left.
Yeah, exactly. Protest, whine, complain, because they have no power. We control the House, we control the Senate. Donald Trump, after all the talk about not being able to get his appointees through, basically he's gotten pretty much everybody through so far, which I predicted. Thune has really been a hero on that. People say, well, Thune is just going to be a McConnell puppet. And I'm like, I don't think so, because I think Thune, sorry, I got the words. I think Thune pretty much towed the McConnell line because he wanted to be the majority leader. So he pretty much did that. But as soon as he got the gig, he's like, McConnell, okay, I'm going to put you over here. We're going to get these things through. So, really the momentum of the Trump administration is tremendous. Okay, let's take a quick break here. And I want you to introduce yourself to my audience. Tell them a little bit about what you do as the host of Media Research Center TV.
Sure. I host a weekly series called Woke of the Week for MRC TV, hosted by the Media Research Center. And a lot of people think when you hear the word woke, you think, oh, a man in the dress. But it's much more than that. It's much deeper. I consider it cultural Marxism. You actually just spoke about how, in order to level the playing field, like what Kamala Harris has promoted, you have to basically take the West in this full circle. Everything that we've made, every point of progress that the Western civilization has made, the left is actually reverting it by importing all these happy newcomers who hate gays, who hate Jews, who hate all minorities. And we actually discuss that during my show, during Woke of the Week. So yes, we talk about the transgender craze, but we also talk about our leaders and our mainstream media egging on the destruction of Western civilization. Sometimes we have a lot of fun during my show. I like to dress up as certain characters. So a couple of weeks ago, I dressed up as the DEI bishop who lectured President Trump right
Oh
after
yeah,
he was inaugurated. And as someone who's Jewish, I know exactly what it's like to have your religion be corrupted by Marxists who don't believe in God in the first place. And I also
right.
played a DEI fire chief a couple of weeks ago. That was fun. And my
That's fun.
show's every Tuesday, so you can tune in tomorrow.
That's great. That's great. And how can people follow you on social media?
Certainly. Go to mrctv.org. That's our website. We're also MRCTV on Rumble and YouTube, also Twitter, now known as X. You can also follow my personal pages. I am Justine_Brooke on X, and it's my full name, Justine Brooke Murray on Instagram.
Great. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. Let's talk about the situation in Ukraine. This is the 800-pound gorilla this week. Okay, Donald Trump campaigned on ending this conflict in Ukraine. I call this a forever war. You know, basically, it's a proxy war between the West and Russia, the neocons in the West and Russia, trying to fight a war with Russia, trying to weaken Russia on Ukrainian soil and using the Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian people as cannon fodder in this thing. And I believe that a lot of the money, and Zelensky even said this, a lot of the money that we've sent to Ukraine, he said half of it, I don't even know where it went. Well, I can tell you where it went. It turned around and went right back to the DNC in their coffers. I mean, does any reasonable person actually believe that Kamala Harris raised $2 billion for this campaign? No. It's money coming from overseas accounts through Act Blue and through these ghost donors. You have some little old lady in Washington State making 5,000 donations of $50 a piece, and she's like, what? I have no idea what this is. This is all laundered back. And now, we're in a situation where the left, the Democrats, are in panic because their USAID money is being cut off. This Ukraine money is going to be cut off. I mean, I don't know where they're going to get their funding for 2026. They have no message. They have no candidates. And now Trump is negotiating peace not in the Middle East, that too, but also in Ukraine. What do you think about this situation? Do you think Donald Trump can get this done?
I really believe so. You already had President Trump bringing home both hostages from Israel,
Right,
hostages who were kidnapped by Hamas to Gaza, and then
right,
also hostages in Russia. These are things that President Trump has done in 3 weeks. Within 3 weeks, President Biden, under his watch, you have multiple wars across the world, and you've had multiple American hostages stolen. And it's almost like he just sat on his hands as taxpayer money we were just blindly spending our taxpayer money on Ukraine, supposedly going to defeat Putin, to defeat Russia. But all it's doing, as you said, all it did was line the Democrat Party's pockets and
right,
line Hunter Biden's pockets and our former president's pockets.
right.
So now we actually see the ball rolling. There
Yeah,
needs to be a solution, or at least a way to ameliorate what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. And I really like what Chief General Kellogg stated. He now works in the White House again. I had the opportunity to intern at the White House during the first administration, and I met him there. And he said, how come for all those years we were just blindly spending money on Ukrainian weapons when there seemed to be a stalemate? The war was going nowhere.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's absolutely terrible. Well, here's what I think. This is what I think Donald Trump's mindset is. So far, he's talked with Putin, okay, talked a little bit with Zelensky, talked a little bit with the Europeans. And basically, and this is like any good negotiation, one of the greatest negotiation techniques you can use is the I don't need you technique. Okay. Yeah, we can do this deal without you. I mean, you can have a seat at the table if you want, but honestly, we don't really need you on this. We can get this done. And of course, this is going to offend the European leaders because why? What's the most offensive thing you can say to a European leader with a big ego? You don't matter. We don't need you. Okay. So this gets them to come to the table. Zelensky, who's out there, oh, what America is doing is not up to our standards, and we don't know if we're going to do it. Trump's like, okay, fine, we just leave you out of this whole thing. We don't need you for this. And all he's like, wait a minute. And then what Trump has been trying to do, he says, hey, let's get our money back on this. We've sent you guys. Trump estimated $350 billion, whatever it is. He says you got rare earth minerals there. What are these? These are minerals that are used in the production of electronics. We need these. Why don't we cut a deal where we take 500 million of these rare earth minerals to pay us back for what we've done? And Zelensky was like, okay, we'll do it. Then he's like, no, we won't do it. And then he's like, well, yeah, sure, we'll do it. And he's like, no, I'm the guy. People forget this guy used to be a comedian, okay? I don't know how he ever got to be president of the country. So what Trump is doing is he's pushing, this is what a great negotiator does. And I don't mean to be monologuing here, but I'll just get into it. This is what a great negotiator does. He goes into a situation, okay? He clears everybody out of the middle and gets them out of their comfort zone. And then they take over that middle position. And then because everybody else will eventually want to get back to their comfort zone, to get back to the middle, they have to come to where he is. That's what he does. That's what he does. And I believe that his greatest negotiating technique with Russia, with Ukraine, is going to be this. Listen, if you guys will end this war, we in the United States will work with you with trade and so on and so forth to make Ukraine and Russia incredibly prosperous. You can be a hero to your people if you will end this war. And I believe that Hegseth and Vance have both said that these borders where Ukraine says we have to have Crimea back, we have to have Donbass back. Everybody's like, it's not going to happen. If you want Russia to go back, you got to give Putin a prize because he's got to save face. He's got to say to the Russian people, I went in there, I got Donbass, I got Crimea, and these are basically ethnically Russian areas anyway. So I think that's what Trump's going to do. What's your thought?
It needs to be a tit for tat situation. It's pretty funny how Zelensky, when we said, okay, you have to do this in return, suddenly he seemed to backtrack a little bit, because for the past 4 years, the deal we had was that we're just going to give all this welfare money to Ukraine, right, and they're not going to give anything to us in return. Right. And I think this is you have President Trump doing what he does best. He is a businessman. You have right. to get both parties to move a little bit to be able to make a deal versus saying, let's just keep the status quo that we've been doing for years. Here's a bunch of money. Taxpayers shouldn't have right. any clue where it's going. Right. Just keep it this way and keep a war going on forever.
Yeah, that's really is a proxy war. The West and Russia and the neocons who hate Russia, want to do this. But here's my position. It's like, why can't Russia eventually be our ally? Japan, we fought a world war with Japan. We nuked them twice, and now they're one of our biggest economic allies. Why can't Russia eventually become one of our allies? Anything is possible if you're a smart negotiator and you can make things happen. If you have the will to make things happen, you can make things happen. So what's happening now is that Europe, thinking they're going to be excluded from this thing, they're like, oh, no, we want to be a part of this. Here's what England is saying. We want to put our troops on the ground in Ukraine as peacekeepers once this peace deal is done. And Trump is like, well, you guys need to start putting up 5% of your GDP, to NATO. And before they were like, no, no, no. And they're like, well, maybe we can do that. And then France is talking about this sort of thing too, and all this. So because they're threatened with being excluded altogether, all of a sudden they're willing, like, well, we'll do this. Well, we'll do this. We'll do that. It's that fear of loss that's driving them and bringing them back to the table. It really is. It really is quite brilliant here. And we'll see how this turns out. If you had to crystal ball this, let's say 90 days in the future, it's 90 days from today. How do you think this is going to turn out?
I think we can see the end of the Russia-Ukraine war hopefully within the 90 days. Who knows what can happen, but I think that we're on a much better path now than we were before to seeing any end.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, that if Donald Trump gives Zelensky and gives Putin an opportunity to become heroes to their people by bringing back prosperity instead of war, peace instead of chaos, a sense of a future instead of hopelessness, then that is a great draw for them. And I think that that's what he's going to do. I think there's a lot of different aspects here. And the fact that he's willing to go in there and play hardball, and he's like, oh, this is how it's going to be, and that really, I think, is super, super effective. And you're starting to get a lot of other leaders in Europe that are starting to say, I don't know, we kind of like the way he is doing this. Maybe we should think about this as well. Okay. Well, this has been a great discussion. I appreciate it. Justine, I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great speaking with you, and I really appreciate you bringing me on.
Fantastic. We'll have you on lots if you want to. If your company will let you. Sometimes you got to check out these things, but anyway, okay. Well, folks, this is going to be live streamed on our X feed, and also we're going to put this together in one big show that's going to be streamed at 7 p.m. Eastern time tonight on X, on Facebook, on YouTube, everywhere. Going to take advantage of the technology. So, Justine, thank you for coming on, and folks, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.